Okay, this is 18 Svea. I've covered it before in a sort of way as a playtest copy, but the designer asked me if I would ever play it again. I'm kind of like, there's something really cool about this because it's a tiny, tiny little 18XX. Only holds 2 or 3 players. It's actually, I don't know, maybe not a great introduction, but a great way to play one that's kind of going to be shorter and much, much smaller in terms of table space, etc. It's also designed for such a small number of players that I don't feel, some of the times people are like, oh, 1846 is good in 3 or something like that. I'm like, I don't know, man. I don't have the interactions and whatever. And I have to agree, with myself, that across the board, I do prefer the larger number of players. I feel like that's a means of introducing chaos. When you're playing in smaller groups of players, it's very easy to predict exactly what everybody wants to do and then figure out your best move from that. But when you're looking at a 5 or 6 player table, for a game with no randomness in it, this one has some, but we'll get to that in a bit. For a game system that generally has no randomness in it, other than where you're sitting, it's you need to introduce some form of chaos. So I said, yeah, in fact, I'd be willing to actually cover it because there are some significant changes in the design after playtest advice from me and others. And honestly, I don't know which things I advised. I see some things that I'm pretty sure that I had marked that have remained in the game, more or less unchanged, but I see some other things that are problematic. Not problematic. I see some other things that are new that I haven't explored yet, and I think it's a neat idea to take a look at how that developed. A few things have changed that are kind of big. One that I think I did have some input on is the number of companies is up to 5. I think that's important. In 2 players, so it used to be 4 companies. In 2 players, each player gets 2 companies. That's fine, But in 3 players, 2 of the players get 1 company and 1 gets 2, and that felt like it could be something of an advantage to the person who gets an extra company in the game. But also, mainly because one of the things in 18XX is being able to sort of rob your companies or utilize them to help each other if you want to be friendlier there. We won't go into. What else? Some of the other mechanisms have changed as well. I'll kind of get to them as I hit them, I guess. There was this weird stocks could be turned into some other kind of investment. It was an interesting idea. I didn't feel like it worked terribly well and leveled some of my criticisms against it. It's been dropped from the game. And that's kind of a shame. I wish a way had been found to deal with it, but because it was an interesting concept, but it's like it added a lot of complexity without adding a lot to the play. Okay. Now these are hand assembled basically by the designer. So if you order one of these, it's kind of neat. The trains are actually back painted with black, so that you can reuse those as the black type trains, which come in later, and I guess they're unlimited. I'm not sure. There's also the stickers have already been placed, so you don't have to worry about stickering your pieces. Obviously, that's not going to be a sustainable business practice, but for now, it's not that big a deal, but they're basically hand PNP'd. Tiny map, tiny stock market, tiny map with huge track. Oh, I don't know about that. I mean, you know, it's kind of a matter of how small do you want to make the map to make the. I think these are big. They feel big. I don't know. The stock certificates are all 20%, which introduces a little bit of weirdness in terms of like what you're used to in an XX game. Let's see. You have some randomness in the game, which is presented in these strategy cards. At the beginning of the game, they're dealt out. I'm going to throw in, I think, these are not well play tested. A set of 3 additional ones, which, you know, being able to see how they work, whatever, whether one of those is particularly advantageous. If I find one that I feel is overpowered especially, but even underpowered, it would be kind of neat to take a look at that. For them, they're a little interesting because both the regular and the optional. Basically, they determine your priority in the stock round. And then once you use them, they have a different value for what their priority in the stock round is. And basically, like here, I guess you get 14.5 priority. You add up all the number of them you have, and I think you have two per player in the 3-player game. I think it's 3 per player in the 2-player game. There are 8 to begin with in the base game. This brings it up to 11, I guess. And only 6 of them will be in play. There are different rules. Basically, they switch halfway through the game here. They're going to switch hands. So at the beginning, they're just dealt out, which always feels very random to me, but it also is helpful in terms of like, I'm not really sure how much that's going to be worth. You know, it's always a problem when you face an XX game to begin with the privates or whatever, and these kind of hold that position. They act very much like them. They produce an income and everything. But once you you know, if you've not played that particular game before, and you know are faced with a handful of like 6, 8 privates, it's sometimes very hard to tell what they're going to actually be worth in the course of play. And so it's hard to determine what you want to bid for them. First game bids tend to be a little bit conservative, so something like at 1830, the Camden and Amboy, which sometimes goes for quite a bit of money compared to its starting value, because it has a lot of power in the game, ends up, you know, on that first game, kind of determining, hey, if somebody kind of figures out what it's used for, and that's a big if. Like, what its power isn't obvious to a new XX player, at least, right? They end up maybe not really using it, and then it from what it's really gets its boost from, and therefore, well, it's not that big a deal that they got it cheap. But if somebody does figure it out, they can turn tons of money off of it and make it into a rather powerful tool in the game. And if everybody doesn't know what's happening and the person who's focusing on it, the guy who owns it, does know, you know, is able to figure out the use and how powerful it is, even blundering into it, I kind of think I did, it can be incredibly powerful because nobody knows how to defend against it. Anyway, why did we wander there? Yeah, I don't know. So for setup of the game, there's something kind of nice here. You've got reserve tokens here, and they're stickered on the back. These are going to be the hometowns of the different companies. This is kind of useful because, you know, here you got your symbol on the board, but once there's track played, when that's just showing like that, it's hard to remember that, hey, somebody's actually there. Now, if this hadn't had a backing, if it just looked like the color, it would be somewhat distracting, and you'd have it, to have, I don't know, let's give you an example. To have something like this on the board, it might be a little distracting because it looks just like that color. So it's kind of nice that there's a thing on the back. I kind of wish the things on the back had been white on all of them. Just kind of a personal preference, because you can kind of blur out the white. Of course, there's a white company, so that might not help as much as I think it would. Okay. All right. Let's look at what we do here. So, and yes, I've read the rules. Oh, the choo-choos, instead of having cards, they have the little chug-a-meeples? I don't know. Chew-meeples? Chooples? Chooples. We'll call them chooples. So you don't have as much information necessarily there. You might have to look that up. There's one player aid card, which just gives the sequence of play. I don't see anything that tells you what the trains do. Oh, here we go. Yeah, the train's capabilities are listed here. The stock valuation changes are listed there. There's a place where something is left out in the rules. We'll maybe touch that if we remember it. The bank is unlimited. I'm using my normal 1, 5, 25, 100, 500. I don't think we'll need 500s, but it's only a $2,000 bank. It's tiny. It only has, they suggest $2,000. You probably want more. I got the starting capital out there. Stock limit or share limit is 8. But that includes strategy cards as well. Remember, they're kind of like minors. No information's hidden in the game. Let's take a look at this. We got these little connections to kind of squeeze the board together, give you a little bit more maneuverability so that it doesn't completely lock out. Okay. The color is of some importance. The yellow or blue, I believe there are strategy cards that link to that. I haven't looked at the cards, but they give their prices in the different eras. We have so there's an additional stock type, or additional track type, the black. It's very special. It's uber endgame. So we're used to the yellow, green, brown, which follow normal progression. We've gotten used to gray. Now there's black on top of that. But there's only one. Okay. At the beginning of the game, you don't have to worry about any kind of first player thing. What you do is you deal out the cards for this, and it's going to be 2 to each player in the 3-player game, 3 to each player in the 2-player game. And again, I'm going to throw in those randomizers in there. But then, over here, you're going to have a special auction of the strategy cards. They're all gathered back up. Whether used or not, doesn't matter. Any token involved in them is pulled off the board. And then they're shuffled. And 2 cards are removed. Well, you return to a 6-card deck. The standard version of the game, you show the cards that have been removed so everybody knows what's present. And then cards are turned over one at a time, and the players then secretly bid an amount of money on that card. And it can be anything from 0 up to what they have. If there's a tie, the tied players are then allowed to add money to the money they've bid. If the bid goes for a second tie after that, like if both of them put 0 or whatever, the strategy card is then removed from the selection process and can no longer be purchased. It might be possible during this that not everyone gets the cards they want, right? There's only 6 cards out there. If there's a tie, somebody loses a card. Once a player has won their 3 or 2 strategy cards, they're out of the bidding, and then people can win it with a 0 bid if they're the only player. Okay. There are options to only use the strategy cards that were used in the first round, so that you kind of know what the landscape is better, especially if you're throwing in the optionals. That might be important, but honestly, I like the randomness. Not used to it in XX, so what the hell. And then there's also the possibility of a perfect information game where you show all the strategy cards that'll be up for bid so that people understand what they're holding off for. Again, you know, you can tinker with the game however you like, but these are some suggested tinkerings, right? All right, what do? They generate an income. So they'll be creating $10 per round. Some of them create 5. I don't know if there's a 0. Spread them all out. I think this one doesn't create any money. But it creates money in a different way. I don't, you know, it's been a while since I've played, so I haven't really studied it, so I don't know what the values of these are at this point. Okay. So in general, if you haven't used it yet, on each operating round, before anybody runs any companies, you'll get the cash from these, just like a private. Not a lot of differentiation in them. Oh yeah, there's a 0. But once you use the special action, and this is not always specified, so, but here it says once you use the special action, it no longer produces the money, and you turn the card to the used side where it has a lower for the other action, which is whenever you hit a stock round, you add up the total number of points that you have on strategy cards, and whoever has the highest combined number gets priority, followed by the second highest number. If there's a tie, the individually highest numbered card among the tied players goes first. I hope it says among the tied players. Ooh, no, the individually highest numbered strategy card decides who goes first. So it's possible somebody not involved in the tie gets the decision. Okay. We have the explanations of each of these. See, these might be more detailed explanations than over here. I think that was the case before, which worries me a little about these guys. So maybe we want to look at each one, see what they do. Infrastructure push. Its special ability is you can once place or upgrade one additional tile during the operating round for a company you own the CEO share in. Now here it says tap the card. I think I mentioned this last time. This could be problematic. I believe Wizards of the Coast has copyrighted or patented the term tap. I don't know if you could patent a term, but I think they do. I actually think it's a patent on tapping cards somehow. But maybe it's just a copyright. But they sued other, collectible card games about this. Certainly they're not going to bother with this at this point, but it is something to keep in mind. I think it had been removed elsewhere in the thing. Tap the card after placing the extra tile. Okay, so yeah. So you get to play an extra tile. That's great. Political influence.
One company of your choice can either ignore all water borders and tile costs on the game turn during ORs, as well as place one station token for only 5 SEK, the money. Or, before collecting income, discard this card. I don't know what that means. Did I know before? Like, discard is not clear, right? It sounds like it just goes out of my hand and away. Does it come back into the deck? I don't know. This is a very powerful one, though. And the player can immediately buy 1 share from the open market. Okay. So I think discard is different from use, so now you get a 0 on your priority for it, for whatever it's worth. Is it out of the game if you do this, or is it available for the reshuffle? Not clear. But discard seems like a weird thing. Anyway, I'm going to play that it's out of the player's hand. It no longer generates any priority if you choose that option, but it comes back into the deck. I don't think that does any great harm. Raising funds. This doesn't create any income at the start of operating rounds. Its special ability is a company of your choice can collect a one-time payment of 25 until operating round 3 when you tap this card. It generates the payment when you tap the card. You don't tap it on operating round 3. A company of your choice can collect a one-time payment of 40 until operating round 7 when you tap the card. I'm guessing that's after 3. That's sort of a secondary. That's a usage that happens in the later, once you bid on it. So it's more money, more prizes. Oh, okay, yeah. Financial planning. Let's look at this one. As CEO, you can one-time freely redistribute your income after running trains between the amount paid out as dividend in the company treasury, regardless of the share ownership. Dividend payout sum must be 5 times SEK. Basically, you have to pay in bunches of 5 so that it divides evenly. And each share gets the same amount and withhold the rest. So this is a way of paying out partial without having to swallow. Could be very useful. Don't know. Yellow offboard contract. One company of your choice gets plus 10 SEK bonus for each start and end train stop in yellow offboard locations. Remember, I said there's some impact to these. And, the cards that you draw initially may determine which companies are useful for you, or more useful. Similarly, there's a blue one, which gives a plus 10 bonus for blue areas. Slightly less priority. Central station. Collect 5, Place the central station disc, that's this, on a tile. Decide its function. ×2 means all station token bonuses on the tile count twice. The black side functions as an extra station for one company and can be placed in any free station slot on the board. So whichever company has this would be able to get an extra station. Now there is a black company now, so this is a little bit more confusing than it was under the initial rule set. New railway connection. Complicated. Okay, you can choose to place a new offboard connection bar. That's this little thing. Now this thing was just kicking around in the box. No problem with that, except, I don't know. But this looks like something that could get lost really, really easily. Okay. Yellow 10, brown 15, black 20. On one of the 3 colored dead-end offboard connections on the board, determine the possible offboard placement by a die roll immediately when the card first enters play. This location is shared with all players and is marked by placing the offboard connection bar along the left side of the card until the card is used and the bar has been moved to the game board. So, yeah, so it'll be one of these locations, these little triangles here. So now it can create a new off-board location that you can hit. How do you remember which one it's on? Yeah, I don't know. The card is used when placing the offboard bar included in the game on the predetermined hex side. Once placed, the offboard bonus for the bar remains until the end of the game. SCA. SCA must mean second card action. That's what's used here. It's not really spelled out. The owning player can place the bar if not yet placed on the game board, and in addition gets a +10 bonus when stopping at the location during each OR. So, this is not going to remove the bar when it's pulled off the board. The disc, the token, does get removed. That was specified elsewhere. What are the 3 additional? City station owner. Roll a d6. You get a town. When assigning to a company, all other companies must pay 5 SEK per train stopping in the city after each turn to the assigned company. Stopping, I think, means that it has... I think it means running through, or it just means hitting, right? But stopping makes it sound like it has to be an endpoint. Tax haven. You pay lower taxes for holding 3 or more shares in the same company or companies. This is something interesting in the game. You're going to be paying money if you hold too many shares of a single company. Instead of, and I don't remember if this was in the original, instead of just being forbidden to hold like more than 60% of a company or something like that, here, if you hold 3 shares, you'll be paying a penalty. Now this reduces the penalty there. And ferry contract, one company of your choice gets 10 SEK from the bank for every new railroad connection built crossing any water. The water barriers are here. And it's kind of interesting. You can just build track out to Gotland. The ferry is just, you know, when you cross that, you pay money. Okay. I'm going to need to pause. As with most 18xx games, the purchase of trains indicates time and technological advances. They call them development phases here. At the beginning of the game, you're going to be on the yellow train. They're the only ones that are available to be purchased, and they connect 2 stops, just like a 2 train in a normal XX. And only yellow track can be built while these trains are the only ones available. When the first person buys one of the green trains, these can run 3 stops, and rest by rest all. Oh, I got you. This is the same color as this. It's telling you what does rust after that. Okay. Let's see. Only yellow tracks are available to use during phase 1. Why is it saying that? When the first T3 train is bought, yellow and green track is available. Okay. And as normal, you upgrade your track. So yellow upgrades to green. You have to maintain all the track connections. There are very, very few tiles of track. There's a lot of cities. But note, there's only 2 spaces on the board that can have non-city track. Okay? So, and there's basically 1 of each track type. Yeah, there's 2 wide curves. Though I really doubt you would put 1 here. Right? Well, there or there, yeah. Okay. Yeah, there's very, very few different track types in this game, which again, reduces the cost by a significant amount, right? You don't have to make all kinds of, all these different kinds of fancy tiles. Make a few of them. None of them are numbered, though. Now, also, green changes the value of some of these towns. So like Gotland, you can't even score any value off of it. It's a 0 to begin with. But this yellow, green, yellow, brown, yellow, brown. They're all mixed up. Like there's all different types of price. And there's this one as well. Which, is kind of confusing, to tell you the truth. Okay. Once you get to brown, that's going to rust all the yellow trains, and then they're available to become black trains as needed. Let's go over here, and I think there's an infinite number. I don't know, they say there's 7, and there's only 7 pieces for them. Okay. Brown run through 4 stops during the operating round. When the first brown is purchased, all the yellows rust. All the track up to brown is available. By the way, what I said, the black track is a special case about the upgrading. We'll get to that in a bit. Okay. When all 4 trains are purchased, both the gray and the black trains are available. You can buy one or either one. Okay. When the gray phase happens, it's a 6 train. It can run through 6 stops on the board during an operating round. When the first gray train is purchased, all the green trains rust and are removed from play. They'll actually turn to black trains. Okay. When the first T6 plus 1 is bought, that's the black trains. And what's the difference? It's a fair difference in price. I mean, consider how low. $30, $35 difference, $35 difference, $45 difference. The trains don't skyrocket up in cost, so bigger trains are a pretty good deal. The little trains don't look like they're that great a deal comparatively. It runs through 6 stops, just like, it runs a maximum of 6 stops. So they're using the word stops to mean hits the city in any way. If a black train is purchased before a gray train, the first black train rusts all greens. Yellow, green, brown, gray, and black tiles are available. Okay. There's 5 different companies in the game. They have 20% shares. They each have 20% shares. There's a special president's share, but it is just worth 20%. And that causes some weirdness. One of the things that kind of I thought was screwy in the game before. The home companies have reserved spots. You can run through those. No one can take the token in them. If the CEO share changes hands, so should the company charter. Okay. During a stock round, now this is weird. I don't remember taxes, but there had to be. There had to be. I'm going to pull out my old rule book. No, that's a new addition to the game. Okay. I'm proud of myself for not remembering it, because it did seem so weird. Okay, so all players have to pay a tax at the start of the stock round if anyone owns 3 or more shares in the same company. I think there was actually a limitation that you could only own like 3 shares or something like that. Which is a big deal because it's generally not in somebody's interest to be funding your company, but okay. Okay, so normally 3 shares costs 10, 4 shares costs 20, all 5 shares in a company cost you $30. You have to pay personal income for it. I think this is prohibitive, and unless you have the special card, you're probably not going to go above that, unless there's a real need to make it worth paying this tax. Then you're allowed to sell as many shares as you own to the open market at current stock market price, and then the price will be adjusted 1 step down for each share sold. The CEO share can't be sold to the open market. It has to be exchanged with someone else. Now, the way that works, and this is twisted to me. If I own the CEO share and somebody else owns a share, they own equal amount to me. I can't sell this. Normally you could sell 20% in exchange for 20% in someone else's hands. They have to hold 2 shares for me to be able to sell the president's share. So you can be an investor in this game without being dumped on, even though the shares are the same size as the president's share. Feels weird. You're then allowed to buy 1 share from the initial share pool, paying the current share value to the company charter. So it's, partial cap completely. You pay based on the value. You pay the company itself that money. You cannot buy a share in a company if you've sold a share in that company earlier in the same round. Makes sense. And otherwise, you could sell a share, drop the price, buy 2 shares. You would drive the prices down to nothing essentially, or as low as they can go. At the end of the player's stock round, you can choose to pass instead of selling or buying. You're allowed back in, same as any 18XX. And you keep doing this until all players have passed consecutively. That doesn't set any kind of priority deal or anything. The priority is always based on the priorities on these. Okay. Value is tracked up here as normal. What do the different colors mean? I don't think they mean anything. I mean, the gray is the starting values that you can put it at, but I don't recall anything about those colors. If you pay out 0 dividends, the price goes down. If you pay out dividends, the price goes up. And it can go up twice if you pay out 2 times the share price. The initial share prices, $25 to $40. Those are for 20% shares. So the president's share doesn't cost double or anything like that. Okay. When a player buys the CEO share, they determine the price, the initial price. During ORs, the CEO can choose to sell shares from the company to the open market. These are sold at current market price, and the share value does move down $1 per share sold. This is an impressive ability, and one that I really like about this game. You have something kind of like it in 1870, but I don't think you can just do it at will. Basically, if you need to raise money, you can just release shares on the market. You get the value of those shares. The value of everybody's shares goes down because it's being diluted. Not to the degree it should, right? Like, if you consider some of the Winsome style games try to get the market a little better, but the 18XX market doesn't quite work right. But the concept of the company having shares now. Okay, did we get payouts yet? I don't think, no, we haven't hit the operating ground yet. Yeah, I think the money goes into the company treasuries for the shares that are in there. That would be normal for a partial cap game. So buying a 20% share floats the company actually. and then the company is able, by running and paying out, 80% of the money goes into the company treasury, which is very, very powerful. Okay, highest stock value operates first. This is normal. And the normal positioning, whoever enters first is the first one in that set. There's a limit to shareholding. In the 3-player game, nobody can hold more than 8 shares, and that includes strategy cards. If you're not able to afford the tax at the beginning of the stock round, you must sell shares. How does it work? To generate money. I think you still owe the tax, even though you sold the shares. When you buy the company president, that floats the company and it'll be operating. The CEO share. It's always the first one bought for the company. The owner of that share makes all decisions for that company. You remain the CEO until someone has a larger number of shares, but the biggie here, somebody can of course buy more shares than you and they take it, but if you sell, and I said this before, you can only sell the CEO share if someone else has at least 2 shares, and then you exchange it. So unless somebody is slitting their own wrists, that 20% being equal doesn't hurt you. All transactions are on the open market. CEO share can never end up in the open market. Okay, operating rounds. You're able to lay or upgrade track, place a station, run trains, purchase new trains, blah, blah, blah. CEO gets to do everything. And they can sell shares from the initial offering to the open market for quick money. This is actually really important because you only have two or three players. The chance of somebody investing in your company becomes very low in games with small number of players. All right. First, in the operating rounds, everybody gets whatever cash they have from unused strategy cards. And then you figure out the turn order based on the share value. If values are tied, first of all, if values are tied, furthest right goes first, and then top of the stack goes first. The CEO is allowed to sell shares at the beginning of the operating round. Then they can purchase trains. This is very different from most XX. You're allowed to buy trains before you do anything else. Now, there's a real possibility of a problem here, and I think this was in existence in the original version, which is that what happens if you buy a train from another company? Basically, you could just have two companies running off one train and share it back and forth. If the train has run before in this set of operating rounds, or in this operating round, it is ineligible to run a second time. So for example, let's say I own the yellow and black companies, and the black company goes first, and I run one train off that. At the beginning of yellow's turn, they can buy that train, but it has to be considered that it's already run. So what you do, let's say it's sitting over here just fine. When it gets transferred over, you turn it to indicate that, yeah, I can't actually run that train. I just wanted to buy it to transfer. And that's important because sometimes you do want to transfer trains between companies, and they might be trains that have already run. But there's just a limitation. Each train can only run once in each operating round. Number of operating rounds is fixed by the turn track. Now, it just happens to be 2 between each stock round. This allows there to be less turns overall. By having this, you can buy a train and run it right away, right? Because usually the first turn a company floats or whatever, it makes no money because it has no train and it goes back in value and all that. All that kind of mechanisms has been done away with. The company starts You buy the company, you put the money in, you buy the train, you lay your track, and you run it right away. There's something kind of clean about that it gets rid of some of the problems. It's just a little different feeling. Okay, then you're allowed to build or upgrade one track tile. Now, cities have a cost listed on each one. And I don't know if that's the wheelbarrow. Yeah, I think it's the wheelbarrow. They cost like $5 to upgrade each city. I'm not sure that was the case before. There's also cost for crossing the water terrain. There are no mountains here. Where am I here? The company can place a station token. They have to pay for that as well. So I've got 2 tokens on each company. One of those tokens is the share value marker. Each company basically has 1 token on the board and 1 token that they can purchase for $10. 10 sweet bucks. Then you run your trains. Running trains is very much like in any 18XX. You can't share the same track. The same train can't hit the same city twice. It has to count all cities that it goes through. Tokens block you from passing through a city but not from hitting it. Stuff like that. I'm assuming that nobody's looking at this who's not already an 18XX player. Although the small size may be appealing to a newer player, I'm not sure that this makes a great intro. I feel like there's enough funky stuff going on in this that you want to get your feet dirty in a different XX before you go to this one. This one might end up being your favorite because of its smaller size and whatever, but it's appealing. And I always recommend the original 1830 short game. If it's not present in whatever modern version of 1830 is out there, I'm sure that you can get the rules for it. It was really, really a tight and nasty little game that teaches you everything, everything you need to know about stock manipulation and raping companies and all that. Okay. Okay. After you run your train, you pay out your dividends or withhold income. It's an either or. It's a 100% issue, but remember, you probably have percentages in here that you're going to be, I don't know, we'll see. Because you've got that easy way to raise money, just throw shares into the open market. Flip the token when the turn is done to make it easier to see who goes next. Share values move differently at different times on the stock market. When you sell a share, each share sold is going to drop the value by 1. You sell all shares at once, take the full value, and then drop it. You don't do it one at a time. Some games do the one at a time. If all shares in the company are owned by players at the end of a stock round, the share price is moved up 1 step unless already on the top, in which case it doesn't move. Now this is where you might own a third share or whatever, but would you own 5 and pay 30? Swedish kroner, something like that. Would you pay $30 for for the upgrade? I don't know. Each of your shares is going up by 10, 15, maybe 5. The stock value is, it looks pretty standard for something shrunk to that size. You move 1 space to the right whenever you pay out dividends during an operating round, but 2 spaces to the right if the total sum of dividends paid out is twice the current share price. I like games that do this. They give you a little boost in income. Basically, if you're able to run for, let's see, when you're able to run for twice the value of the company. So a company that's at a low value, let's say you're at $30, you only have to run a 60 run to move forward 2 spaces. If you end up not paying dividends, either because, well, basically, I think the only way you can manage that is by swallowing. I don't think there's a case where your dividends will be 0. If you end up not paying dividends, your share value drops to the left. Just one. You always place under tokens that are already there. Track construction and cost. Okay, let's take a look at this. You may decide to build yellow or upgrade basically yellow to green, green to brown, brown to gray. The black tile that can be placed on any, it says previous city. Actually, it's any city on the board, whether there's a tile on it or not. Yeah, it says regardless of whether there's a tile. Company must be able to run a train on at least part of the new track in order to build a new tile. Wow, that's a weird rule. What does that mean? It means you can't upgrade a city if you're blocked out of it unless you have another entry route into it. I guess that's the biggest thing it means. I mean, look, it means that you can't, like, sometimes you want to build something like this and you want to put it in a stupid direction to block or something like that. You can't do that, and I'm fine with that. But in terms of city upgrades, it actually has an implication. Like, let's say there's a yellow city here and I'm dotted out of that city. Like, my train's coming this way. Somebody else has the dot here. Right? Let's put it here. Somebody else has the dot here. I can't build, I don't know. I can't build this. In fact, I can't, well, obviously I couldn't build that. I can't build this or this. Well, yeah. But anyway, the point is that there are some, normally in an XX game, you can always upgrade cities because that's going to increase your value. That seems to be limited by this. And given that, you know, all but 2 of the hexes on the board are city hexes, it's going to have some influence. And I've got to be careful about that because that's going to be hard for me to remember. I could easily see myself cheating on that. All tiles, okay. Cities with slots for station tokens cost 5 to place on the game board, except for the black tile, which costs 10. Yeah. So we have a 10 in the little, I don't know what the hell that is. A wheelbarrow? I mean, it's got to be. Anyway, shopping cart. All right. Okay. If a tile's not available, you can't use it until it's been removed from the board and put back into the stock. Standard XX rules. There are some that allow infinite tiles. Usually play those online, where, you know, it's like, hey, if the track's allowable, I can build it. There's no blocking with track. I've always felt that there's something very weird about, like, oh, somebody built this piece. I can't build anything like that until I go and, like, rip up that piece of track and put something that looks exactly like it and is better. You know, I don't know, you can't actually replace that one. Wow, that's gonna, there's no boot plug. There's usually one that curves into here that's brown. And, you know, it just seems weird that by adding certain track in a certain place, now I can use that track pattern that's out there. It just always feels like a weird thing. However, in the interest of countermix, and there's so much wrong with XX. Oh, geez, I had I had a thought about something. Yeah. All right. This is one, and maybe this designer will want to explore this. But one of the things XX kind of gets wrong. Usually, I focus on the stock market and the manipulation of that. How shares, if there's loans and stuff like that. It's usually the financial aspects that I rag on about XX, which is the strongest point of the game, honestly. But for the track building segment, or a portion of the game, they put dots in cities, which prevent you from going beyond that city. And I believe that's highly, that's unrepresentative of reality in most cases. Let's put it that way. Sometimes there is a case where the city absolutely has to be transited to get through to get through terrain. It might be the only crossing across a river or something like that. But usually it's fairly easy at the scale the games are to avoid the city and build through the same area in reality, right? Like, take a look at, say, I don't know, I'm used to Albany in New York, right? The train track runs right through Albany. But there's the other side of the river it could be on. Or there's just outside the city it could be on. These things would be easy to do and would cost about the same as building track anywhere. Whereas building track in the city is more expensive, which is one reason I kind of like these cost increases for the cities. So it would be, the game probably should allow you to transit around the city. The big issue is whether you have access to the city itself as a direct market, right? So one of the biggest cases I can think of is New York City. And if you play Railroad Tycoon, you'll be used to this. But in New York City, it was exceedingly expensive to, push the NYC, the Penn, whatever, to push them in and put a big enough station to operate to be useful for that city's value, etc., into the city. First of all, you had to build the track to get into Manhattan itself, right? The companies tended to own the track, but they would sometimes share it, which kind of reflects some of this, maybe kind of. Less so early on. Early on, the companies competed with each other by laying track. But none of the games really get this right. Even Crayon Rails doesn't really get it right in this sort of sense, although you can bypass cities more easily there. There was an intense cost to building into the city, and then building up the infrastructure necessary, to be able to service that city at a proper level, where, you build something like Penn Station or whatever. So that's where the big cost lie, was getting into the city. Now, to some extent, the tokens sort of represent that, right? But they represent it all wrong. The tokens block you from transiting through the city or by the city. There should be an ability to bypass cities. Of course, given that it's shared track and whatever, that's probably XX is the wrong design to do this on. But I've never seen a game that handles this correctly. The closest I've seen is the computer game Railroad Tycoon. But that game has a problem in that the only way two people can be sitting in the same location is while they're conducting a trade war, a rate war. And I don't buy that. I just don't buy that. It might be true in some areas of the country, but it certainly wasn't in the East Coast. In the East Coast, companies basically had to pay their way into the cities to begin with. Like, one of the things with the way the West worked was towns would try to encourage the companies to hook up to them and whatever, and maybe give monopolies and such not. But that was not the case in most areas. And the idea of the rate war is that, you cut your rates so low that the other person loses the rate war and has to pull out. But honestly, you would never have to pull out. Two big companies fighting over a town would never have to pull out. They could just consistently take losses on running to that town and try to blow the other guy out. And probably what would actually happen is they just stop having a rate war and both coexist. Okay. Where did we get? The black tile is different from all others. Gives the company a chance to dominate the hex. Say what? It can be placed on the board as the first tile or replacing any city tile, regardless of whether it's yellow, green, brown, or gray, as long as the rail connections are legal and maintained, I assume. If there are stations on the replaced tile, the player purchasing the black tile can freely decide how to place them on the black tile in the available slots, okay? So the black tile has, most of these towns have a value, and I think that's what these people stand for, that represents the value of the town, of the space. The black tile has a value that differs depending on which station you have. All companies running trains to or through the tile generate a stop worth 10 unless the company has a token on the black tile. Then the stop generates the amount specified on the token position. One player gets 30, another player gets 20, and then the remaining one will only get 10. Okay. Building new track, replacing tiles. I think this is normal. They talk about running imaginary people. You know, I don't know if there's something special going on in Sweden, but trains were, yes, they made money off people. There's no question of that. But they made more money off of delivering goods. The game doesn't really go into, you know, the particular productions and whatever, but just saying it's people feels wrong to me. Anyway, I'm so picky, am I not? Let's see. You can only build new track and hexes that you have an unblocked track connection starting from a station token. When green tiles are available, they can replace yellow. I don't see anything exciting there. When upgrading a track tile, the new tile can never be selected that would disrupt or alter any existing track. Yeah. I'm looking to see, but yeah, they don't repeat the other thing that I had some iffy feelings about. Each of the 5 companies has a hex city with their pre-marked symbol. Those count as blanks while they're on this side, but once the company starts, they get that. Now you'll notice each of the tokens has a +5. That's because if you own the station or a station in the city, you get an extra $5 from that city. Right? Or is it everybody? Oh boy, it's going to be under routes or whatever. Each station token adds 5 when running trains out or past. Oh, no. You add 5 to the city. Each person who puts a station token there adds 5 to the value of the city. So this with 2 tokens, even though they're different companies, they must be, will be worth 30 to everybody. Interesting. Yeah, I thought that was, something felt wrong to me, but it's confusing to me because the designer of this game has designed a couple of games, and they all have some sort of weird, interesting little things to them. And one of them relies very heavily on, I think it's the Mars one, on tokens showing up, what tokens are where, like creates a lot of really interesting dynamics in it. His 2 previous games, Mars and Moon, 21 Moon, 22 Mars, I think, are obviously not set on Earth. So they're kind of, a fantasy, or, well, more technically a science fiction situation, but I consider it fantasy because, I don't know. Whatever. Science fiction economics. Even though they're XX style games, they're played in this situation where the rules are basically made up. There's no attempt to match necessarily history, so it's a projected reality. Science fantasy, whatever. It's not, though. That makes me think space opera type stuff. The home station token is free. Now, your run. So if there are no empty slots in a town, people who don't have a token there can't run through it. That's standard. Each of your trains has to run a route that includes at least one of your tokens. The home station token is free. The second station token costs 10. It has to be put in a vacant slot. I think you have to be able to reach it. Yeah, you have to. A company may not place a station which can only be reached by passing through another tile which is entirely blocked. Yeah, you have to be able to run a hypothetical infinite length route. If a company has a station on a tile, the same company is not allowed to put another one on that same tile, which is kind of weird. Like if you're playing a two-player game, well, somebody could own two companies and dominate a tile. So yeah. All right. I'm just thinking when you're playing these small number of players. Like I played a three-player game of 1846, where basically I and another player came to an agreement not to put a dot somewhere because our runs were too vital going through there, and the other player didn't have a dot. Both of us had like two companies, and all of our companies were running through that one important space, and basically we agreed to leave it open. And we both kept our deal, which is really kind of weird. Like, you think 18xx is so fucking cutthroat you would never do that, but I don't know. I feel like you make a deal, man, you keep it. You might play with that person again. They get a feeling for... Anyway, I just don't like breaking deals. We've talked about routes already. Revenue. When hex changes color, the income changes as well. Off-board stops have pre-printed stop values in different phase colors, and they can be very different. CEO decides whether dividends are withheld or paid out. The company itself is a shareholder to whatever degree that they have. You must always run all available trains. So that's a weird one. Companies required to run all available trains. There's also a requirement that you must run for the maximum value if a shareholder points out a higher value. There may be a possibility that there's a conflict between those two. Yeah, and they show what happens with the money. If it's in the open market, it just goes back to the bank. Company must own a train at the beginning of each operating round. The CEO can either purchase the cheapest available train, except for the choice to buy a black train before a gray train. You can choose to buy a black train. From the bank. Alternatively, a train from another company with that CEO's consent at an agreed upon price with a minimum of 1. Whenever a train is purchased from one company to the other, the transfer takes place in the purchaser's turn. Once the train has run a route during an OR, the same train cannot run again in the next OR. This is a big deal. Company can own up to a maximum of 3 trains at any given time, all through the game. You can purchase a train with the company's money. You can do it after issuing shares in the open market, purchase a train with the company's money, or after issuing shares to the open market and contributing personal money to the company as needed, purchase a train with the company's money. Now, this is interesting. Step 3 is interesting because we look here. If a company does not own a train and cannot generate enough money by selling shares, they must be financed by the CEO, covering the difference between the CEO's private money. If the CEO does not have enough money, one or more shares must immediately be sold to cover the cost for purchasing the train. The CEO can also choose to finance the placement of a station token or tiles. for a company that doesn't have enough, either enough money or any sellable shares in the charter. I don't know if that's a restriction that, like, if you have shares, you can't throw your own money in. The CEO can finance the placement of a station token or new tiles with private money, but must pay twice the normal amount. Stations cost 20. So here's the thing. I feel like there's a little bit of an ambiguity here. Here it looks like after issuing shares to the open market and contributing personal money to the company, or after issuing shares, after issuing shares and contributing personal money as needed. It sounds like you can just choose to throw your money in. But when we get down here, it looks like you can't just decide to throw 10 bucks into your company so that it can afford a train if it already has one. It has to be a forced train purchase, and that's what I'm going to do. But here, token or track lay, you're allowed to make that choice, but you're not allowed to make that choice if there are assets in the company, like stocks that it could sell. Okay. The game ends at the end of operating round 7, or if somebody hits here where it says end of game. Players control their total wealth, basically stocks and money in hand. Whoever has the highest wins, and these things are worthless at that point. Anything inside the companies, any trains, any money, isn't worth anything. Standard 18xx there. All right, I need to break for a little bit. I tried to point out a few places where I knew that there were differences or saw something changing in it. There are some big changes that I want to look into. This is operating differently. If at all, the extra company in play, which I don't think is going to have much terrible effect. Getting rid of those, the other financial instrument in the game, which really didn't do a hell of a lot. It was this weird sort of like big decision that you had to make as to when you wanted to convert into that kind of investment instead of normal shares. It didn't appeal to me very much, and probably not to the other playtesters involved in it. The tax, that's gonna be an interesting new thing. Now, that gets rid of the sort of rigid ownership penalty, like the fact that you're never going to sell out in a 2-player game, you're just never going to sell out your company, all right? If you can only hold 2 shares, it's just not going to happen. There aren't enough spaces for it, which feels a little weird and stuff like that. So the tax should be interesting in there. We shall give it a try. Oh, plus new cards in here as well. We'll give it a try. I suspect it's going to play very similar to the last time I played it, with less frustration, because I had a lot of frustration about when to use that other financial instrument. I don't remember what it was called, but it was like an investment or something. I don't know. It is what it was called. I don't know. I'm sorry, this one feels like I was blundering through the rules. It feels that way to me too. Not sure why. I read through them. They didn't sink in terribly well. And then rereading them, I mean, I kind of understood them. I could have played it, but whatever. All right. I guess up it goes.